2 clocks, 1 week. In the same week that Tony Blair published almost 6,000 words telling Britain it must hold on to the transatlantic relationship through the discomfort, a senior Pentagon advisor walked into NATO headquarters in Brussels and told the alliance what it would no longer be getting. The figures, reported by Der Spiegel, were not subtle. Alexander Vélez-Green, a senior advisor to the Defense Secretary, presented them to NATO political directors behind closed doors on the Friday. American fighter jets available to the alliance cut by a third, strategic bombers halved, fewer destroyers, reconnaissance drones to be provided by the Europeans themselves, and, in the line that did the most work, no American submarines committed to NATO at all. The Europeans were told to close the gaps as fast as they could. This is the part worth being precise about, because precision is where this argument lives or dies. What is being withdrawn is not the United States Navy from the Atlantic. It is the American contribution to the NATO force model. The pool of forces the alliance's commander can reach for at short notice to deter, and if it comes to it, defend. Under that model, agreed in 2022 after Russia crossed the Ukrainian border in full, the United States provided roughly half of NATO's total military capability. The week before last, the Europeans found out how much of that half is being taken back. They had walked into the room expecting minor adjustments over time. They walked out having been handed the burden of their own conventional defense. Hold those two events next to each other. Blair, writing that Britain must keep faith with the alliance. The alliance, in the same days, being quietly drawn down by the partner that supplied half of it. That is not two stories. It is one story told on 2 clocks. The political clock is the one everyone can read. It runs fast. This week it is running on Makerfield, where a by-election on the 18th of June has consumed the attention of the entire British political class. It is running on the slow-rolling question of whether Keir Starmer survives as Prime Minister, and which of his colleagues fancies the job. It is running on Blair's intervention itself, which arrived calibrated to dominate exactly this conversation and duly did. 6 weeks, maybe less, is the horizon the political clock can see. The strategic clock runs underneath, and almost nobody is watching it. It runs on the American withdrawal from European security, on Russia's grey zone war against the continent's infrastructure and undersea cables, on the architecture Europe is now scrambling to build in, the space the Americans are vacating, on the post-industrial arithmetic that no British leader caused and none can reverse. It does not move in 6-week cycles, it moves in years, and then all at once. The 2 clocks do not just run at different speeds, they interfere with each other. Drama on the fast clock creates vulnerability on the slow one. Every hour the political class spends on the leadership psychodrama is an hour the strategic conversation does not happen. The noise on the surface is not separate from the danger underneath. It is what allows the danger underneath to go unaddressed. Start in Texas because someone there has just learned the lesson the hard way and said so out loud. Senator John Cornyn lost his primary runoff to Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General, after Trump endorsed Paxton in the final hours. Cornyn had voted with Trump 99.3% of the time. He gave the president his earliest ever endorsement in a contested primary. By the metrics loyalty can measure, he was loyal. On Tuesday night, Paxton won. 3 days later, Cornyn posted a fable. The Scorpion and the Frog. A scorpion asks a frog to carry it across a river. The frog hesitates. It knows what a scorpion does. The scorpion reasons with it. Why would I sting you when stinging you drowns us both? The frog finds this sensible and agrees. Halfway across, the scorpion stings anyway. As they both go under, the frog asks why. The answer is that it could not help itself. It is its nature. What the fable describes is not naivety. The frog reasoned correctly from available logic. The scorpion has no incentive to sting. The frog's error was believing that incentive governs a creature that acts from character. A character, once it is character, cannot be negotiated with by appealing to mutual interest. You can see the danger clearly, reason past it, and still drown. Which brings us back to Blair. Blair's essay is a serious document. He diagnoses Labour's self-delusion clearly. He is right that reversing Brexit is not the answer to Britain's 2026, far worse than 2016. On the condition of his own party, he sees something real. The strategy rests on a single claim. The week's events raise the question of whether it holds. Blair argues that the transatlantic alliance faces not a rupture, but a reckoning. That Europe is being told some home truths it would be wise to wake up to. He points out, correctly as far as it goes, that American security strategy identifies the same threats Europe does. Russia in the Arctic. China over the longer term. Iran in the Middle East. He notes that Trump has demanded higher NATO spending, not the dissolution of NATO. The conclusion he draws is that Britain should smooth its relations with the administration, negotiate from strength rather than weakness, and hold the line on an alliance that is fundamentally still there. Reckoning implies a relationship that survives the hard conversation. A reckoning is what two parties have when they both intend to carry on. The word does an enormous amount of quiet work. It tells you the thing is still standing, that the discomfort is corrective, that on the far side of it the alliance continues in recognizable form. The submarines are the answer to the word. You do not, in the middle of a reckoning, zero out your naval commitment to the alliance you are reckoning with. The Vélez Green briefing is not a home truth delivered to focus European minds. It looks less like a reckoning than the early administrative stages of a withdrawal. The fighter wing cut by a third, the bombers halved, the submarines gone to zero. These are not negotiating positions in a conversation that continues. They are the inventory being drawn down. Here is the held line, because it matters. What is documented is the briefing, its contents. Der Spiegel's reporting, confirmed in its broad shape by the congressional pushback, now working through the 2026 defense authorization, is, the reading these cuts suggest, that something more significant than a reckoning is in motion. That may be a strained inference. It is also the most economical one available. And it raises a question about what Blair is asking Britain to hold on to. There is a second move in Blair's essay worth naming, because it has a mirror image on the other side of British politics. Strip Blair's argument to it says, align yourself with this power, pay it the tribute of your deference, and you will be spared the worst of what it can do to you. He calls this realism. On the populist right, Nigel Farage makes an offer of the same shape from the opposite direction. Align with this power, and I am the man who can broker it for you. He calls it getting Britain a seat at the table. I am not telling you these two men are the same, because they are not. I am telling you the offer has the same shape. Pay tribute to authoritarian adjacent power, or face the consequences of having refused. The trouble with paying is the trouble the frog discovered. The payment assumes the other party is governed by the deal. The scorpion is not governed by the deal. You can pay every installment. Vote with it 99.3% of the time. Give it your earliest endorsement, and still find yourself stung in the middle of the river, because the stinging was never about the ledger. There is a deeper reason Blair's program cannot deliver what it promises, and it runs through the thing this project keeps returning to. The digital media environment and what it is doing to the conditions for thinking clearly in this country. Follow the chain. Britain cannot repair its democratic architecture without getting a grip on the digital media environment, the algorithmic incentives, the foreign money, the hostile state amplification that turns ordinary grievance into manufactured fury. It cannot get a grip on that environment alone. The platforms are continental and global in scale, and only a regulatory bloc of comparable size has the leverage to make them comply. The bloc of that size on Britain's doorstep is the European Union, which has spent years building exactly that regulatory capacity. And Britain cannot reach for that capacity while it is organizing its foreign policy around keeping the goodwill of the American tech ecosystem that owns the platforms and bridles at the regulation. So the program eats itself. The alliance Blair says Britain must preserve is actively hostile to the one form of collective power that could address the thing most corroding British democracy. You cannot subordinate yourself to the American settlement and regulate the American platforms. You have to choose. And you can watch the choice playing out, in miniature, in Makerfield. Makerfield is where the geopolitical and the local turn out to be the same thing. Reform won all 8 council wards 6 weeks ago on roughly half the vote. What the result on the 18th of June matters for is this. What does a trades worker in Wigan, carrying the cost of a transition no politician will name, actually believe about his prospects now? Does he see a path, or does he see grievance as the only available form of power? The post-industrial arithmetic is real. Manufacturing gone, services economy thin, the transition unmanaged. Reform's vote is the local expression of the same rearguard action visible from Texas to Brussels. Concentrated grievance with no positive program, mobilized by people who benefit from the anger staying unresolved. Watch the swing, not the headline. Burnham has a personal premium. If he wins by more than his own celebrity can account for, that is different from a loan of his reputation for a night. And watch whether Restore Britain clears 10%. If it does, the fracture on the populist right is durable, which means the architecture of British electoral politics is being shaped, in part, by American tech money moving through a single postcode. These are the things that matter on the night, They will not be the things the campaign is talking about. I read conditions for a living. Out on a hill, the job is not to predict the exact hour the front arrives. You cannot, and pretending you can gets people hurt. The job is to read what the sky is already telling you and decide what to do while you still have the choice. The group that sets off without reading the weather does not get to renegotiate the conditions once it is committed and exposed. The weather does not care what was on the agenda. That is where Britain is. The fast clock says the question is who leads Labour into the next election. The slow clock says the question is whether the European security architecture hardens fast enough. Whether Britain is inside it or outside it when it does. And whether anyone gets a grip on the information environment before the next manufactured fury arrives on schedule. The submarines being pulled from the alliance. The senator posting fables about betrayal. The American money moving through a by-election in Wigan. These are not separate weather systems. They are one front, and it is already on the chart. Blair has at least done one useful thing. He has started a conversation the current Prime Minister has not been able to begin. That is, worth something, even with the diagnosis pointing away from the strategic clock. But the conversation he started is incomplete. He is asking how Britain holds on to the relationship. The relationship is withdrawing its submarines while he writes. The question is whether Britain reads the weather before the front arrives, or only afterwards, when the conditions are no longer ours to choose. The clock you are not watching is the one that is about to matter. This piece drew on reporting from Der Spiegel on the Pentagon briefing to NATO, on Tony Blair's essay for the Tony Blair Institute, published the week of the 26th of May, and on coverage of Senator John Cornyn's response to his Texas primary runoff defeat. It builds on the project's earlier work on the two clocks framework and the rearguard action thesis. Where the piece moves from documented fact to inference, that boundary is named in the text.